Good morning, good day, and good evening. I'm as usual your host, Brody Robertson, and today we have a very interesting guest on the show. Welcome, Jay LaCroix from LearnLinuxTV. How is it going?
Oh, it's going incredibly amazing. Just talking about Linux all day and, having a platform, something I think you know something about. It's the great times and I can't complain. How about you?
Yeah, not too bad. Finally, we got to do this after last week, or was it last week, the week before? Whatever it was. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's hard to get, sometimes it could be really hard with my schedule lately, but
Mhm,
I think at the rate I'm going in probably a month or two, I might be kind of normal in terms of schedule. Who knows?
mhm, mhm.
But it happened. That's the important thing.
Yeah, that's true. For anyone who doesn't know who you are, just give a brief introduction to yourself.
So my name is Jay LaCroix. I'm from Learn Linux TV, which is now my only job, the third year going, actually. It
Impressive.
was a nervous decision, but it was pretty cool. I come from a system administrator background, specifically Linux. I've written 6 books, and my YouTube channel just crossed 600,000 subscribers like a week or two ago. So,
Wow.
which I did when I first started, I didn't even know there were that many Linux people. Of course, I'm joking, but I didn't know a niche platform would grow this size. So it's
Mhm,
kind of amazing to see it happen.
mhm. Yeah, no, that's really cool. I don't know what the biggest Linux focused YouTube channel is, but you're definitely in like the top five, without a doubt. There's not many
Yeah, it
others I can
seems
think
like
of that are
it.
bigger.
Yeah, there's a few out there. I never get a chance to watch too many videos, which is a shame because the production time is getting longer and longer and longer. Like the KDE video I put out yesterday took an entire day, and I couldn't believe it. Like, and it's not even that long of a video, and I'm
Mhm.
thinking like, how did I manage to spend that much time on one video?
Honestly, I look at the way that a lot of other people handle videos, and like my editing is fairly simple and fairly lightweight, but I look at like the way that you edit videos. I look at the way that like Nico Loves Linux edits videos, and there's a lot more work that goes into it for some people. I don't know. Like,
Yeah,
there's this like weird point where I don't know if adding more effort makes the video better. Like, there's like a clear cutoff point there, right? Where you
right.
can spend another like 3 hours doing something for like a 5 second cut. But like, does that really make it better at that point? It's the 80/20
Mm.
rule, basically. Like 80% of the work is done with 20% of the effort, something like that. Is that how that works? Whatever.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
basically, it's there's a balance because at what point do you say you're going too far with the editing
Right.
and you're just like your attention to detail is just way overboard. I mean,
Mhm.
there's a fine line from being a perfectionist to just putting out something sloppy. But I'm a perfectionist, and I guess I had to accept that about myself, but I'll still have to force something out the door, even if I'm like, I could change this, I could change this. No, 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 just release it and put it out. I have to keep
Yep.
myself honest sometimes, but I think that's when you care about what you're doing. You don't really want the world to see it unless it's in what you think is its best form. But
Mhm.
sometimes that in and of itself can take time away from engaging with the community or making more videos. We spend
Mhm.
all day editing one. You could have filmed three. So
Yep. Yeah, like that is a big problem. Just knowing when to put something out, because at the end of the day, like that's what matters, right? Like if you could spend a week editing a video, and then if you don't release it, like it doesn't matter how much time you spent on it. Like that,
right.
none of that matters then. Like at some point you need to decide on when it's done. And I get for some people that can be like really challenging to do.
It is. Sometimes it depends on the video because I don't know which ones you've seen, but sometimes I dabble with special effects just to surprise people. They don't really expect it in my videos, which makes it even more hilarious when it happens. But on April Fools, I always try to do something just totally crazy, weird, or just plain silly.
Mhm.
So the most recent one, I have a like conversations with myself, and we're in the same room, and like it's a hacker movie with two versions of me interacting, and then
Mhm.
that took a long time to finish. But the whole point was April Fools,
Mhm.
so that I could make an excuse for that because
Right.
that's a once a year thing, so that's fine. But I'm not going to put that much effort into a tutorial unless I just have no life.
Right. Yeah, April
Right.
Fool's is always a fun one for me because I like to upload the video Australian time, which is the day before for most US people. So, and the way I like to do it for mine is I like to make the humor very, very subtle and then make it more so throughout the video. So, like,
Right.
obviously, if there's two of you, people are going to notice that straight away. But my last one, I don't know how people didn't notice. I made like a fake YouTube apology video, and I was basically pretending like I had never actually installed Arch Linux. My entire time on Arch had just been it just been like a really well produced theme of Ubuntu.
Hmm.
And
Wow.
somehow it took some people like 8 minutes to work it out.
Oh my gosh, I know. Well, interestingly enough, like the video I did, I waited like several minutes into
Mm,
the video before the other copy of myself comes up. So at first, people are like, "Well, this is kind of weird," and then I see the reactions live as soon as the other person comes in. But sometimes it's just yeah, like a value negative. You just got to try to get in there and get it done. But getting content uploaded can be
mm,
is a job in and of itself. I guess I'm speaking to the choir here.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, well, once you have like a flow down, like that's always the big problem. Like trying to work out some sort of workflow, whether it be for your thumbnails or be for your video production or any part of it. Like once you at least have
Yep.
that down, that does simplify some of the process. But you still, if you're trying to make better videos, you're gonna try to improve upon it. You're gonna try to make like
Yep.
different edits here and there, try to do different things here and there. And no matter what you do, you're never gonna be in a state where you feel like it's perfectly ready.
Right. Right. And also it's not gonna be in a state where you're not gonna have sarcastic comments from people that didn't even watch the entire video.
Mhm,
"Why didn't you answer this? Well, if you would have went a further into the minute." I mean, nothing could save you from that. So there's all these YouTube type things that, I don't know how often you deal with these kinds of comments, but
mhm,
they come in and you're like, but you're still gonna get those regardless of your editing, regardless of the time.
mhm,
So the workflow that I've come up with is just, basically coming up with a list of ideas and it'll graduate to a, decision. I'm going to make this video that I've decided to make. And then, it's kind of like a Trello board, basically. Well, actually, that's exactly what it is. And it goes through the swim lanes. I have a scripting lane, then I have the, editing. I have to, proof it before it gets released,
mhm,
things like that. So I think part of the efficiency is just not doing double work. If I'm going to do a video that shows someone how to do something on Ubuntu, and I'm also going to show someone or show a video on how to install Ubuntu, why wouldn't I do those one after another, right?
mhm,
Because I mean, I wouldn't want to like wipe the computer, do Fedora, and then go back and do Ubuntu and install it again for the installation video.
mhm.
So sometimes the order that you do the videos in can make all the difference.
I guess that makes a lot of sense when you're doing videos. Like a lot of your videos are like there's clearly like a how would I say it? Like a through line between them. Like you can clearly see that some of them were produced at the same time. There's like clearly a link between them. Obviously, the best example of
Yep.
that being the tutorial videos, which are clearly numbered, so on and so forth.
Right.
But even so, like you can clearly see from the outside that you did some of these in a certain like order when they were produced. Mine are very much more like one-off things. Like maybe there'll be
Mm.
I'll come back to a topic after a couple of months, like Pop OS's our System 76's new Cosmic desktop. Like I will talk about it at one point, and then I'll come back check in like a couple of months later. So it's not really as directly connected, but I don't know it's just a different way to approach the content. Like you do very different sort of videos than what I do.
Yeah, well, sometimes there's going to be situations where I can't get away with that too, because I think there's going to be times where you have to go back to certain things. So what I've started doing, and I hope this isn't a terrible idea, I've created a B-roll library. So anytime
Mhm,
I show myself doing something, I'm like, oh, that'd be good for the library, and then we'll see if I can pick from that and maybe save time from getting B-roll. There's all these things that we think about as content creators, but then at the same time staying up to date on all the technology that's happening and everything that's happening in the news and the latest plasma release, had to check that out. I just decided all of a sudden if the world depends on me doing a video right now. Okay, I'm joking on that. It wasn't that that, but sometimes you get this idea like I got to do this video right now because why didn't I do this video already? Oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot about that.
Right.
You know, all
So,
kinds of things to keep track of.
for sure, for sure. So how long have you been making videos for?
I think the channel started in its original form in 2012 or 2013 or somewhere around there. But
Okay.
I didn't make it a serious attempt until probably I want to guess 2017 or 2018 because that's when I really felt like I could make this into something. Most of the
Right.
older videos aren't there anymore, but it's also hard to say I've been doing it for 10 years because I've always hated editing up until lately. I love it now, but
Mhm.
for most of my career, I've hated it. I just felt like I wanted to talk into the microphone and teach and do the things and then have that be it. But the other parts of it, I went into kicking and screaming. But eventually, I started getting into editing and realized that I loved it. So we could argue that that's when I started with the video because doing everything in one take was really, really tough. Yeah, I
I
don't wish that on anyone.
I've tried a little bit to do like one take stuff, and I can't do it.
Mm,
I need like
mm.
I need to cut things. If I this is a good example of what happens when I do things in one take. I just ramble. I take a lot of pauses,
Yep.
and yeah, it's not a pleasant viewing experience. If I'm just like, if the point of the video is to just ramble, like in a live stream, for example, it doesn't really matter. But if I'm trying to talk about something like a new Wayland protocol, for example, and I want to
Mhm.
get to the point and explain what it's actually about, I stumble across words. I lose my train of thought, and this is yeah, I it just makes way more sense to cut it. I know some people don't really like really jumpy cuts, but you get jumpy cuts or you get unwatchable videos. Those are your two options, basically.
Well, eventually, you get to a point where people won't even notice that anyway.
Sure,
Because
yeah,
if you're
no one
doing, I
really
mean,
comments
people
anymore.
expect cuts. If you watch the local news, I mean, and count how many jump cuts there are in one local news broadcast, but nobody even raises an eyebrow about something like that. But
Mhm.
as soon as it's in a YouTube video, it's a problem. I think at a certain point, people really stop caring. I
Mhm.
don't think I've seen that comment in quite some time. I used to, but I think there's a little process you go through, and eventually people, oh yeah, he's editing. We can't change how he's doing it. He's doing his thing, so they kind of accept it.
Well,
At least I hope they.
I think also when you started, like the YouTube landscape was like very very different back then.
Oh yeah,
Like back
oh yeah.
then, that was like when people were first trying out doing the jump cut thing, and like a lot of the jump cuts weren't just cutting a sentence, it was like jump cuts to like impact. So you like
Mm,
jump around the screen and all like and people just had like this bad first impression with it. Like there's nothing inherently wrong with the editing style. It was the way that it was very energetic videos and they felt very very artificial. It felt like,
mhm.
like Disney Channel artificial where like this is clearly not how this person actually acts. Whereas if you're
Right,
just
right.
jump cutting for the sake of being able to properly string together a thought, it's a very different kind of editing.
It really, really is. And for me, I think the best trick is just to make the jump cut look like a camera angle, then nobody will even notice.
That's a good
Just
point.
just zoom it in a little bit, just shift yourself over to the right, over to the left, just change it up a little bit, and it looks like a different camera angle, and usually it's pretty much accepted. That it took me a while to learn or to figure that out, but once I did, it's like, "Oh, okay, that's actually not very difficult." DaVinci Resolve even has a close-up button on the speed editor now that does exactly that same thing, which is pretty cool.
I'd never even
So,
thought of
that's a
something
I
like
don't
that.
know if you ever tried that on your channel, but it could be a way to kinda make the jump cut seamless.
No, I haven't. I've never considered that. Huh.
Yep. You'll see it on my video. If you check the older ones, I actually do have 2 cameras now. So,
Mhm.
if you check, like, anything from last year, like I would say the tail end of last year you'll probably see it at the beginning of the video.
Okay. Let's see if we can find one. Like, we were 9 months ago. Let's see if I can just jump around through it. Actually, I probably won't be able to jump around through it just to cut like that. Uh, yeah, that's not gonna happen. Anyway, go check out Jay's videos. You'll see what he means, I guess.
Hold
Um.
on.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good.
Apparently, I can't drink water today. That's embarrassing.
You good?
I am good. Yep, just relearning how to drink water, apparently. Alrighty.
Yeah. It's fine. This is why I don't do any cuts during the podcast. You get random fun things like that.
Yep, yep. I encounter that all the time, or the random cat that shows up,
Hmm.
or a kid that comes into the room.
Hmm.
So,
Yep.
oh
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So you have like cleared out like the old content on your channel. Like, you said you started like 10 years ish ago, 12 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, that's kind of a weird thing about YouTube because there's all these things that you don't think about. So someone, I don't even know if this is true, but somebody in my circle said that he was under the impression that having less quality videos will kind of have, mixed quality, old, bad quality, new, good quality, but it's not consistent, and
Mhm.
that by removing the older videos, it makes everything more consistent in quality, which
Mhm.
would maybe help the algorithm or something like that. We don't even know if it's true, but
Right.
some one time somebody thought I was just deleting content or just trying to get it off the internet. I'm like, I didn't even know anybody was still watching that video. Like I'm surprised even anyone even knows about that video anymore.
Mhm.
But you find out pretty quickly. But at some point, I just didn't want my older content mixed in with the newer content because I feel like the difference is kind of jarring.
Mm. I've definitely heard people say that before, and not like recently, but definitely like 4 or 5 years ago. I do remember that being like a
Mhm.
common thing people would say. I like
Yep.
here's the problem. Like it's a black box system, right? So it's just a matter of like testing it here and there and seeing what sort of output you get. And usually what you get from YouTube, just you've got to do big tests to work anything out with it, because it's such
Right.
a complex system that I don't think anybody, well, I guess besides Mr. Beast apparently, has a good
Hmm.
understanding of how it actually works. Like, most people are just trying to see what they can do and hopefully get it to work in their favor. You've got like,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
basically YouTube in a nutshell. I think you've nailed it. That's basically what it is. You
Mhm.
you hope for this 1% improvement, that 1% improvement, which doesn't really amount to much individually, but these little tiny tweaks over a long period of time, they start to add up. And I
Mhm.
think that's when you start to see the difference. But it's kind of defeating to some people because they don't see like a big jump. They're
Right.
looking for that big pat on the back. They see like, oh, I made $70 last month, and this month I made $80. So great, I can get a PS5 game, I guess, or something like that. And then eventually it, goes up as you go. But it's just every 1% really counts. But after a while, it starts to stack. And then that's how, unless you're Mr. Beast, or I don't know how he got big, but
Well, initially
unless you're that popular.
he was spending like 16 hours a day messing around with YouTube, like actually going insane with it, treating it like the only thing in his life. Like that, if you do that, yeah, I'm sure you can work something out. But if you're a normal person and you're spending, maybe like 5 hours a day, 6, 7 hours a day on YouTube, like, yeah, you're gonna work stuff out. But a lot of that's also video production as well. You're not spending
Right.
all of your time just analyzing the algorithm, analyzing analytics, analyzing other channels' analytics, because that's also very important, because it's not just a matter of what your channel is doing, because yours might be an outlier here. You need to see what like other people are doing and how they're editing and how they're approaching content production, and then you gotta make sure that what you're actually seeing is actually real and you're not tricking yourself into thinking there's a thread here when there really isn't.
Right, right. Yeah. It's just amazing all the idiosyncrasies of content creation when what really I think a lot of people they don't even like that. They like the content they're making. They like their community and all this stuff, but they don't like the things they're forced to pay attention to that they really don't care about. It's like I don't get excited about tags. I don't get excited about descriptions, right? But you have to do it, and you have to have a good SEO title, and I hate them. I hate them all. But
Mhm.
the fact is, you don't want to be in a echo chamber either. You're putting a lot of time into this, and you want people to be able to get access to it.
Mhm.
So it's just all these different things that go into it. And it's like, I just want to make content and not think about those things, but eventually just have fun with it. Like the thumbnails I've done recently are pretty much sarcastic insult towards thumbnails in general. I thought I'd
Mhm.
have a little bit of fun with it, and not in a cringy YouTube way, but in a cringy YouTube way, making fun of the cringy YouTube way. Because if I'm gonna have to join them, I may as well make it fun, I
Mhm.
suppose.
I
So
guess there's one way to look at it. Like,
yeah, so I had a thumbnail recently with a penguin attacking me allegedly because I made one of the 5 mistakes on the thumbnail that I warned people not to make or something like that. So
mm,
just have a little bit of fun with it.
honestly, people talk about the whole like YouTube face thumbnails,
Right.
like oh that I actually enjoy making them. Like I know people like there's some people that complain about them, but maybe this is going to be an unpopular opinion, but there is this viewer power fantasy that their opinion
Mm.
on the way that thumbnails work, the way that
Right.
titles work, that what they're saying is actually reflected in reality. And one thing I have very clearly noticed is what a lot of people say they want from a video isn't necessarily what actually is being watched. Because I've made videos
Right.
of people like, oh, make a video, this like super niche video on this thing, and like 10 out of 10. It's like, okay. And then I make
Yeah,
a video on
yeah.
my first impressions of Plasma. I'm like, oh, okay, sure, that did well.
Yeah, it is interesting how that kind of thing works. The YouTube is just so, I don't even know how to describe it half the time. It's just all the, like I said, all the things you have to pay attention to, and then the content. Like
Mhm.
I record some of mine months ahead before anyone sees them. Like sometimes people, oh, that video that I just watched this video. I'm like, you just now saw that video? Oh, right. I just put it out yesterday, but I filmed it like last summer or something. Having a content workflow where you have a bunch of things, in a pipeline. But
Mhm.
it sounds to me like our experiences are roughly the same because of things that you're running into, especially when you say that, people, their way is the best way. I get that a lot. But I also wonder if that could be because of our audience. Not that there's anything wrong with the audience. I mean, like tech people are very passionate about how they set things up. Like if you go to a business and a seasoned network administrator is there and you ask that person, how did you set this up? They're going to tell you how they set it up.
Right,
Well,
right.
if they have policy to be allowed to tell you, but if they do, they'll brag about it. Why? Because they're really proud of it
Mhm.
and they feel like their way is the best way. So when that person watches a YouTube video, what kind of comment do you think that person makes? And I think
That's fair.
sometimes the type of content we make kind of attracts people that are very passionate and specific, to put it a certain way.
Mm. No, that's definitely fair. I Most of the content I watch is at least like tech adjacent. Like it'll be like gaming content or it'll be like
Right.
other things like that. There's not much I watch that's, I don't watch like I know this is like a big thing in certain spaces. I don't really watch like mechanic videos, for example. I don't know if their
Right.
audience is different. It's like our car channel video is different, our makeup channel is different. I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But at
I can tell
least
you it is. I could
okay.
tell you it is. Well, at least for some, because I'm really into, retro gaming is my side hobby.
Mhm, mhm,
And I'm looking up even newer games, it doesn't matter. I'm looking up how to do something because I'm stuck on something, and somebody will have a video showing the game and how to get through that particular area.
mhm.
And I don't really see anybody that often saying, that you're stupid for doing it that way. You're supposed to do that and go this direction. And sometimes, but not really. But when that happens, if, as long as the person's nice, they might actually have a better strategy in the comments.
Mhm.
So it's not like they can't back it up. They could give you the strategy right there in the comments. You could test it for yourself. Sometimes they're actually right, but most of the time it's, "Oh, thank you for showing me how to do that. I spent hours trying to figure that out."
Mhm.
And that's as much as it goes. They're not as passionate about it because if they get through the area, they can complete the game and move on to the next one. But as soon as you get a passionate tech person behind something, then I think that really comes out. Their passion comes out in the comments. I think we're going to probably get that more often than some.
Do you find you get a different style of comments between like your tutorial videos, like the Tmux videos you have out here? I guess that's a bad example. They just came out, but like, what's a popular
Well, they
tutorial that
came
you've
out a few
done?
months ago. I re-uploaded a
Oh,
few.
okay,
So
right.
those are actually 3 months old. I
Okay,
had a sponsor that no longer has a contract on those videos, so I had to take a ad out of the,
right.
another YouTube thing I had to pay attention to. And I think I did that just before we got on air. So yeah, we do get different, or I do get different comments on the tutorials.
Like your SSH
Usually,
full course, for
yeah.
example, like that has like 500,000 views, and then compare that to like a Plasma review or like a distro comparison. Like, do you find the people commenting on the SSH video, like you get like a different style of comments there, or like what's it like?
Yeah, because you'll get people on, first impressions videos arguing, and it's something I've never enjoyed about technology. My mindset is use Windows, use Mac, use Linux. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it.
Yeah.
Use whatever you like. I don't really care. I love Linux. I'll teach Linux, and that's the community that I'm in. But I don't really, care what someone else's, situation is. They could use whatever they want. But other people will have a mindset like you need to be using Linux. And if you're not using Linux, you're wrong. And I'm like,
Mhm.
says who? Like that's that person's computer, that person's workflow, and that person, I mean, someone's workflow is intimate and how they deal with that and how they configure their software to deal with that. And you're telling them that you know more about their software choices than they do.
Mhm.
That doesn't really make sense to me. But you get a lot of those comments. But don't get me wrong, I get a lot of great comments. So I'm not trying to make this out to be like everyone is complaining, but if you have like 20 really amazing comments and you have one, bad one, that one bad one kind of stands out a bit
Yeah, that's
because it's
fair.
like, really? But yeah, I think the comments do differ because you're going to track it's like the hero content versus the evergreen content. The
Mhm.
evergreen content, if anyone's watching doesn't know what that means, is, like a bash video. Bash doesn't change much. You could watch one of my older bash videos. Chances are it's exactly the same. And everything I said is still true today, even if it's like a 10-year-old video. That's evergreen. But we're talking about KDE 6, for example, Plasma 6. I still can't call it Plasma when I'm not editing my videos.
Everyone
But
calls it a mix
yeah,
between KDE 6, KDE Plasma 6, Plasma 6. I
right.
I think I've seen KDE devs refer to it as KDE 6.
The desktop environment formerly known as KDE or something like that. But no, but in all seriousness, you put a video out like that, it's in the news right now. Everybody's looking it up. You're going to get a ton of views on it, and then the views just kind of die because um, at some point, Plasma 6.1 will come out, so no one's looking for the 6.0 video anymore because the new one's out.
Right.
But if it's a situation where you have like Tmux or SSH, I mean, these are things that people are using all the time. So these are people that are learning, they're studying, maybe they're going for a certification, they want to just kind of learn how to do something for work or whatever the case might be. So the comments there are going to be more inquisitive. They're going to be like, and they're almost always really good questions too. It's like, well, if this is the case, then why is this not the case? Like they make this connection, and I'm like, well, that's pretty smart because I probably would have thought the same thing when I was starting out. And they're a lot more patient. But as soon as you start talking about distributions or desktop environments or system D, then things just kind of go from there in their own direction.
Yeah, I talk a lot about Wayland, so I know exactly what you're saying there.
Yeah, it's yeah, it's like, oh, we got to test it. Well, yeah, we have to test it before we can use it, but if we don't make people use it, nobody's testing it. That type of situation that we're dealing with that
Yeah.
I think Plasma knows all too well from the past.
I think the like what gets how to say it. I think there might be like a bit of a communication barrier in some cases with my videos because I like to be very straight to the point, right? So I will
Mhm.
talk about things, but I think the way that like for example, a lot of the Wayland approaches are better. I think that some of the things that Plasma 6 is doing, they're good, but there's some very rough edges. And I won't like navigate around that. A lot of the time I'm just like or like tiling window managers, for example. I think tiling is just a better approach to handling windows. And because of that, I get some comments from people being like, oh, why are you trying to like force this onto me? Like, I'm not
Hmm.
trying to force anything onto you. I've made it very
Right,
clear when I talk about like Wayland is the future of the Linux desktop. Like that's a fact.
right,
That doesn't mean you
right,
have to use it. Like you can go and use
right.
anything you want. assuming that someone packages it, and that's the other thing that I bring up every so often, and people don't like to hear that. I'm like, yeah, but Red Hat is pulling out of Xorg completely, and they're basically one of the main
Yep.
maintainers of it, so you've got to maintain it yourself pretty much if you want to keep using it. And when I say that, people are like, oh, well, why are you trying to take this away? Why? Like, no one...
Nope. And that really
yeah.
drives me crazy too. I think GNOME gets the most of that because people will make comments again. And don't get me wrong, if somebody says, I dislike GNOME, I tried it, it's just not for me. I have
Sure.
nothing to say to that. Whatever. I've tried many things that didn't work out for me. But if somebody then gives a reason that's not true, then it's like, well, hold on. Like they'll say, well, it's bloated. No. Yes, it is. It's using a gig of RAM. Unused RAM is wasted RAM.
Mm-hmm.
Good. It's caching RAM. Congratulations. It's doing what it's supposed to do. It doesn't mean it's heavy, but people get this opinion that it is, even when it's truly not. And you measure it, and I could line GNOME up with Mate, roughly the same amount of memory if you want to really get technical. But they believe it's true, and then there's all this culture of don't use this because I don't like it. I don't
Right.
like GNOME, you shouldn't use GNOME. I don't like Plasma, so you shouldn't use it. But that goes against the very reason why these exist in the first place,
Mm-hmm.
because we could use something if we don't like the other thing. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the point. If you're on Windows, you can't say, I hate the interface. I'm just going to delete it and put a different one on it and then use Windows with a different UI. And sure, Windows users are probably saying, well, I've done that yesterday. Yeah, theming the Windows desktop is one thing, but actually putting a different desktop environment on top of it, that's what we get to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that is amazing because we don't all have to like the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's when the community starts to miss the point, and why I try to double down on everyone has his or her own preference, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we have these things.
Well, one of the things that you did mention in there was that how I'm really struggling with words today.
Yeah, me too. It's like freezing down here, and I've got to turn the space heater on. So,
Well, it's 8 o'clock.
it's
It's
a
8 a.m.
basement
here. This is
studio.
when I normally be waking up. Uh,
Ah,
so one of the things you mentioned in there was people having thoughts on something based on things that are not true. And
right.
I don't think it's always that they're not true. I think it's that the information they have is outdated. That I think is a lot
Yeah,
more often, where you have something like
yeah,
GNOME likes to remove features. Yes, they did. Like back
right,
during the end of GNOME 3, they were
right.
completely removing major modules because they were rewriting things. They were removing features back then, and then they've been slowly adding them back in with like a properly maintained module that they can actually like develop and improve upon. So that was true at a point. Or
Right.
people's perception of Plasma, like I've said Plasma is kind of rough around the edges, but there are some people that their last time using Plasma was KDE4. And like, yeah, you're going to
Ah.
have a very different opinion of Plasma, especially if you use 4.0. Like,
Oh gosh. Yeah. Yeah. I stuck through from 4.0 to 4.12 and used everything in between, if I remember correctly.
mhm, mhm.
So that was my last. I was a Plasma user full time up until I think right before 5 came out. I just almost made it to the end of 4, and it didn't
Mhm.
quite make it all the way. But when you say, so we have things that people say that aren't true. Yeah, I do see your point, like outdated information. But they'll sometimes people say, well, GNOME is removing features because they're trying to push, this onto other
Sure, sure.
people, when they literally say we took out this feature because we just don't have enough people to take care of our code base, and this one isn't getting any attention at all.
Mhm.
So, it's probably a security risk as well. But if someone wants to, like, help out, they might be more inclined to keep it around. But sometimes it's just important to understand that developers don't have a team meeting with the community and say, we need to make everybody angry. So how is the best way that we can make everybody angry with our next update? Because that's what we want to do. Like, nobody has that conversation.
Mhm.
It's kind of like this, I guess you can't please everyone kind of thing, because if you go this direction, then these people that don't like that direction, they won't go that direction. But then again, we have other desktop environments. So at the end of the day, I feel like it's always okay in our community.
I think a lot of people have this misconception of the way that like a lot of these big projects are run, because you can look at a small terminal and you're like, oh, there's like 5 contributors on the terminal. Like, okay, that makes sense. And you look at something big like GNOME, you're like, how many hundreds of people are working on it? I don't know what the number is. If somebody happens to know how many contributors there are, let me know in the comments.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, it's probably over like a couple thousand. Like over the lifespan of GNOME. How many of them are active? I don't know. But people see how many people work on it, how much money like the GNOME Foundation has, like the fact that the GNOME Foundation actually has like employees, and I think they assume that if there's that many people working on GNOME, every part of it is being treated the same way. Whereas there are things like the GNOME calendar, where that's basically maintained by one guy.
Yeah, I think the number is quite large. I don't know what the number is either, but the number is quite large when you just add up the straight number. But when you put some criteria on it, like okay, lessen the number by I want only the people that are full-time employees, then the number is going to like shrink considerably because how many of these people spend more than an hour a week? I mean, I'm sure a lot of them do. But maybe somebody only has an hour extra in their week to donate to the project, and their name's going to be on there. But if that's the only hour that they have to contribute, then I mean, it's not like, to your point, it's not going to be the same. Whereas if Microsoft has X number of developers on Windows, you could pretty much assume that they're probably full-time positions, each and every one of them. But sometimes a contributor could be a one-time contributor that just submitted a patch, and then that's all they wanted to do, and that's all they ever do. So it's really hard to convey that to people. But also, I've seen people that pay for things like have less, anger when they don't get their way, because it's like we get the software for free. We could contribute to it. We could donate to help out. But it's always interesting to me that it's like people won't even file a bug report if there isn't one, when that could really go a long way to getting it fixed. But open source is another discussion that probably go in many different directions.
Maybe this is like a incorrect way to think of it, but a thought I just had is maybe it's due to the fact that you can see how everything comes together. Like, you can see all the internal discussions, you can see the bug tracker. So, whereas with something that is proprietary, generally you don't know what's going on. So you don't even know, like you just assume that somebody is probably doing it. Like, somebody is involved, somebody is already fixing it. But when it's open, it's like, okay, well, everything's here, and other people are going to see the thing that I try to contribute. Other people are going to see my bug report. Maybe they're going to disagree with me. They're going to disagree with me publicly. Like, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's something there as well. It's just a thought I just had, so not really properly thought out.
Oh, I'm so sorry. There was some noise in the background. I missed the last part of what you just said on my end. I had my microphone muted. I'm sorry. If you could repeat the last thing, I sort of have to ask that.
Basically, I was saying, because everything is open, you can... everything is open, so other people can see how you're contributing, other people can see your bug reports, other people can judge what you're doing, and maybe there's like some fear to getting involved there, because if you were to report something to about a Steam game, for example, maybe you'll get an email back being like, thank you for your bug report, but that's basically as far as it goes. But if you're doing something on a public project, on something that's open source, like, there's going to be this public back and forth here. So maybe there's like a stage fright there or something? I don't know.
I think it's a combination of everything, because open source is similar, but it's different. I mean, at the end of the day, you're being provided software, whether you're able to download it, download the source code, or you just pay for proprietary software. The end result's the same. How you get that software and how it's made is different. So if you think about proprietary software, it's very much a transaction-based system. I bought this software, I have this expectation, or if you're a company, you have this SLA, or have this expectation on the contract. But if it's open source, expectations completely change. In some cases, you can't really have them, because maybe they're just volunteers on this project, and you can't really expect anything in particular out of volunteers. Or, but then again, you could have open source where you can have expectations, because Red Hat doesn't get to say, if they have a massive problem, oh, it was just we didn't get enough volunteers to take this CVE seriously, right? They have companies
Right.
depending on them. Well, sure, it's a bad example because they're paid open source, but there's other things like that too, where you have companies using it, so the expectations are bigger.
Mhm.
And meanwhile, you have different types of users. You have, people that just edit photos and they're not computer users. You have people that check their email. You have people that are writing code and all that kind of thing. So you have all these different people, all from different backgrounds, approaching this thing that, to be honest, I feel like would be kind of hard to understand to an outsider. Open source, like, how does that work? And the questions are always the same. How do they pay their bills if they're giving everything
They
away? And
don't is the answer.
right, we all have trouble with our bills. No, but I think because you have an open source, you have such a varied way that it's going to be. I mean, you have different licenses, you have different styles, you have, open source software that has a closed source, UI on top of it, like Vivaldi, for example, with the open source browsing engine. Then you have something not open source on top of it. And it's just, but you want this intimate relationship with your software where you could depend on it to do the thing that you want it to do. And that's what everybody wants. But when you don't write the code and you don't know how all of this works, it's really hard to navigate that system and try to get, visibility onto the thing that's going on that's causing you to not get your work done. It's
Mm.
tough.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's definitely tough. And I think the problem is that even over the time that I've been using Linux, there's been, and I'm sure it's been even more so over the entire lifespan, there's been a shift in the kind of people using Linux. It's become less technical people, it's become less programmers, it's more general, normal people. And
Right.
they're going to have a different expectation with the way like software is handled. Like if you go back to the start of Linux, for example, back then, like the very, very start, like pre-Debian, if you wanted to install Linux at that point, you needed to have a Minix system or another Unix system that you used to bootstrap your file system that you could then put the Linux kernel onto, and then you would need to use that Minix system to go and compile your tools and bring the tools over as well. Like at that point, you have to be a very technical user. You probably have
Right.
minimum some level of programming background. So basically everybody back then was contributing to projects in some way, whether it was to the Linux kernel, whether it was to some tool. Like I'm sure there was someone out there that was using it that wasn't.
I'll say, I don't know if this is a popular opinion, but it's just what I've noticed.
Mhm.
It's not like I've done an analysis on this or anything, but it seems to me like it was Windows Vista's fault, believe it or not. I know that sounds
Okay.
strange, but okay. So when Windows Vista came out, and I don't need to go into Windows Vista. I
What
think everybody
year
knows
was
that
Vista?
debacle. Was that like 2006 or so? I want to say, I could
Sounds
be
close to
guessing.
right.
But
7.
either way, it came out, it made a lot of people angry because it was, just didn't perform well. People had complaints. Now, when I first started using Linux, it was like installing the NVIDIA driver. You were risking bricking your entire install and having to start completely over from scratch each and every single time you do that. So around 2006 or 2007, I can't remember exactly, but somewhere around there, Ubuntu started the Ubuntu drivers thing to automatically install the NVIDIA driver if you needed that kind of thing. And then around the same time, I think the Totem video player had the feature where if you try to play a media player, or excuse me, a file type that you don't have a codec for, it'll tell you that it can't play it, but then proceed to apt install whatever it needs and then play the video. I
Oh,
feel
GNOME
like
videos
all of those
demos. Okay.
changes, especially like live CDs where you could demo before you install it and have that entire environment, I feel like all of that, at least as far as I remember, happened around the Windows Vista time period, which makes me think that the boost of Linux to what we have today started from anger from Windows Vista that
Hmm.
we kind of don't even remember now, because that to me was the time period where it really started to get easier, because I started noticing I had to do less.
Right.
I had to do less to get my Wi-Fi driver installed. I had to do less to get my video driver installed. I could use a live image. Like Knoppix came out as a huge, huge revolutionary thing to put a DVD in your drive and just run from the DVD. we don't even think of it as anything but, something we take for granted now. But
Mhm.
back then, it's almost like we had this Linux renaissance because of Windows Vista that no one really noticed happened.
Mhm. I would say the first, it's definitely a smaller turning point, but the first turning point would have been the shipping of Ubuntu, because
Yeah.
that changed the distro landscape. Because pre-Ubuntu, how long have you been using Linux for? When did you
I
start?
started in about 2002.
Okay, cool.
So,
So you're around there. Cool.
yep,
I can skip over some of the
yep,
context. Um, so for anyone who doesn't know, prior to Ubuntu, it was very common for there to be paid Linux distros, not just like, oh, you paid Red Hat to use their like their commercial support and all that. It was no,
was
it
Caldera one of them? I can't remember now.
yeah,
Something like that.
but there
There
was
was a
like
few.
there was a lot of these paid distros. You would buy a Linux DVD, and not just buy a Linux DVD because that was a convenient way to get it. Like that was the only way to get it. You bought a
Right,
DVD to get it. Ubuntu came along and killed that. You don't see
right,
paid distros as a norm nowadays. There are obviously examples. You have Elementary has their optional it's basically a donation on the download page. You have Red Hat, which doesn't sell you the distro, they sell you support, and that's the way that it's typically done now. Usually there isn't an upfront distro cost, it's a cost for the things that come along with it, because Ubuntu completely destroyed that model by doing everything they did completely for free, because
yep,
it was funded by someone who was a multimillionaire and could afford to do that initially, and destroyed that model entirely. So that was the first
yeah,
start. And then obviously, yeah, Vista I think is a big one as well. Um, I
yep.
think the next big shift was probably when Linux gaming became viable. There might have been something else in between there as well, but that was definitely a massive thing. Because
I
then,
don't know. I might not agree on the gaming part of it. I
okay,
mean, I feel like it's going to be bigger. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying gaming isn't better. It's awesome. But as far as having an impact on Linux, I feel like maybe many of those people were already interested in Linux anyway, because I think of things a little bit differently.
mhm,
Because when I look at the overall ecosystem, like when I was a kid, I had a Sega Genesis. I knew that a Super Nintendo cartridge would not fit in my Sega Genesis,
mhm,
and I couldn't play it on that system. So why are people nowadays thinking that Linux needs to play their Windows software when it was never made for Linux in the first place? When my understanding has always been this OS, this platform takes that software, this OS, that platform takes that software. When I hear about people gaming on Linux, I often think of it as like trying to make it out to be something that it isn't. It's like they
mhm,
want to take this piece of Windows with them over to Linux. And sure, Linux will probably do it better. And I feel like Linux is better overall for this, but the developers see it differently and they have to port these games over. It just seems to me like going straight to the source and playing games on Windows would be the better way to go. But instead, we're forcing games to go on Linux and then and that's all okay. But where I have a problem with it is when people say, I hate Linux because it doesn't run my games. Well, it was never supposed to run your games. It was
mhm,
never advertised to run your Windows games. So I feel like the thing that is amazing about gaming on Linux is just how they solve this problem. Like, we want this to work, so here's what we're going to do. And
mhm,
then Steam comes along and says, we want this to work. And there's these people that come together and want this to happen, even though the software isn't meant for it. The end result is we get together, we make it happen anyway. But I don't know that I guess my point is, as amazing as the, outcome is, I don't know that I would say gaming is quite a big boost in Linux, when it comes to usability, but then again, I'm not an analyst, so there could be, a
I
flaw in that.
I can't speak for everybody, but I can say for a fact that I probably wouldn't be daily driving Linux if I couldn't play games on it. Like I
Hmm,
want to play games on my system. Like that for me is a massive use case, and that was one of the things that kept me away from it back like when I first like one of the things that one of the big things I first heard about with Linux was when the Steam machines came along, and the Steam
oh,
machines
yeah,
being an utter failure basically because they tried
right.
to do they tried to force developers to make games for a platform that didn't have gamers on it, which was just not a it was not a sensible like marketing
No.
strategy for it. So
I
being
was
able to
hoping that would work, but it didn't. Yeah,
yeah,
I do remember that.
So being able to say to developers, hey, with some maybe minor tweaks, but in most cases you don't need to do anything, your games are here. It for the users who actually are interested in gaming, it's less of a difficult transition because most people don't want to dual boot. I know some people like dual booting and that's neat. I don't want to dual boot. When I dual boot, I don't dual boot
Yeah.
properly. Like my dual boot is the laziest. I swap my drives in my BIOS because I've had nothing but issues trying to set it up properly with my bootloader.
Oh, I literally early in the channel made my computer like almost like a cartridge system with like 2.5 inch swappable SSD bay. I can just pull out the drive, slide another one in, just
Yep,
put it
yep.
in this little caddy. They become a cartridge. So it's like have one labeled this OS, that OS, have like a stack of SSDs. I just swap them, but you have to shut the computer down, which is always
Yeah.
awkward. I solve the problem differently, but I think this is because I'm more of a console gamer, but I do love PC
Right, right.
games. So that is definitely a need of mine. But when I was coming up in Linux, I never really felt like my Linux box needed to be my gaming machine also. That was my productivity box. That's how I got things done. That's how I get work done. That's how I design things. My desktop PC, I think this was many years ago. What year this was? I think I had a Windows XP 64-bit edition back when that was a thing, running on a desktop that only existed for games. That was its only purpose. No work is done on it. I play games on that, but I get work done on Linux. So I liked having that separation because it just was so much better for me not to want Linux to be something that it's not. I could use Windows for what I think it was good at the time, and Linux for virtually every single thing else. Later, that graduated to I think this was after the Steam box or the Steam machines came out and failed. I liked the idea, so I kind of created my own and just had a PC that's hooked up to the TV, and that's how I play my games. And then later, that became a streaming server where I put it in the rack, and then I use Steam streaming, and it's headless.
Mm-hmm.
I bought a fake monitor from Amazon. Did you know that was a thing?
What a fake what?
A fake monitor,
What does that mean?
like
What?
a fake display. It's
What?
you buy these on Amazon for cheap, and it's an HDMI plug that tells the computer, "I'm a 1080p monitor. Honest, trust me, I'm really a monitor. That's what I
What?
am." And it looks like a flash drive, and it probably costs like $10. So it literally tells your computer that you have a monitor attached, which then allows Steam to run without a monitor. And then you just put that on a 10 gig network, and then just with Windows installed, you can stream all your Windows games to any computer in your house. And then over 10 gig, it's like extremely fast. And then that's where I think I ultimately ended up, just to try to solve the problem.
I've never heard of these before. Because I
Yeah,
know
I
you can obviously
think
emulate
they're
things in
weird.
software, but like I didn't know there were like hardware dongles for it.
I just Googled it one day. I'm like, I wonder if anyone's done this. And sure enough, I'm like, oh my gosh, it actually existed, because it was the missing piece. Because I kept plugging this server into my network, and I can't stream any games. Why? I plug a monitor in, I start the game, and it works. And then I start Googling it, and obviously it makes sense now because there's no surface for the game to draw on. So what's it going to draw on? There's no monitor, there's no display. So you just got to check the box that you have a display, and then you could turn my gaming machine into a streaming server for the
Mhm.
games, and then that's where it ended up. And now with the Steam Deck, I don't even have that anymore, because that's what I use now, because it works for virtually everything I want to play on it, which is, to your point, gaming is amazing on Linux. It's just when someone wants Linux to be something that it's not, or judging it based on something that it's not, that's always kind of like the interesting thing about Linux in this community I've never fully understood.
I think the difference for you is it sounds like you've had multiple computers like in your house at the same time for a long time. Like it's just been a normal thing for you.
Um, Not really. It was at a point, but I was always like really, really poor up until I got, my career started.
Mhm.
So I would have a lot of hand-me-down
Right,
computers.
right.
So
Okay.
somebody would just give me one because it's like really old and barely worth keeping around. And at that point, I would use it for something, and I can't sell it or do anything with it because it's given to me for free. It didn't even have any value. So it certainly has less value by the time I'm done with it.
Mhm.
But so they just kind of stick around, but I'd have these different machines, and then um, my laptop wasn't even that powerful, but if I'm not playing games on it, then it doesn't really have to be powerful,
Mhm.
because it's ultimately I'm just pretty much in the terminal most of the time anyway. So
Right.
um,
No,
that worked for me. But yeah, I can see your point. People want
a lot of people
their
want like one
one
machine.
device to
Yeah.
be all the things, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I get that. I do get that. I would love for that to be the case, but I think until we get the Thunderbolt thing figured out, it's going to be kind of hard to make that the case.
Mhm.
Can't even get the eGPU thing
Oh,
figured out. Sorry, I think the
for anyone just listening, some of the lights went out.
sorry about that. My home assistant decided my TV needed to go off
And
and
that
all the
brought your lights
studio lights.
down?
Yeah, it was like, oh, you should stop working now. Interesting. I didn't know that I didn't turn that off before we started. I apologize about that. That's
So you've
my
done a
you
lot
need
of
to
home
stop
automation
working.
stuff then, I guess.
Oh yeah, I definitely do. But this one needs a little bit of work because it interrupted your episode here.
No,
So
this is
that's
actually
not.
perfect. Tell me about your home automation. I've not even considered doing any of this.
What's that?
Tell
You
me
had
about
no
your home
idea about
automation.
what?
Yeah, tell me what you've done. What you got going
Yeah,
on?
let me go ahead and get the recording lights back on, and I will tell you all about it. There we go. Okay, now they're back. All right, so it's a project that's kind of on pause right now, but it's mostly done. I would say it's probably like 80-90% done. So I wouldn't say there's anything too amazing, but um, my cameras are automated with it for recording. Wake on LAN for the recording PC. So I guess that's pretty cool. Like it's mostly lights, cameras. I automate when the lights go on and go off. I like to map things to the sunset, sunrise plus 1 hour usually works best for me. And another thing I like that I didn't know you could do, I found out you can hook it into pfSense and Unify, so you can pull in information about devices and put automations on there. So the way I did it was I liked, and I wish I could show it to you, but I like to keep everything simple. So what I feel like when it comes to home automation is buy-in from people in your house is extremely important. If you make it annoying, they're never going to like it again. If you show them something complicated, they're done. Okay. You got one shot. It's got to be simple. So I basically figured out, and I'm sure this is in the documentation, I found this on accident. You can have sub pages when you hold or long tap on something in Home Assistant. You can actually have it go to another screen. So I can have one button that turns on the TV and the sound bar and the Blu-ray player all at the same time. So someone just has to hit that one button. But if somebody wants to control any of those devices individually, then they can long press on that same button. Then another menu comes up with all the individual controls. And for that, I used an IR blaster to copy all the remote code. So then it was able to operate pretty much everything in the rooms that I have. But there's a lot more that I want to do with it, but it's just with creating content, then I don't get a chance to go in and fix it. Case in point, my 6 o'clock turn the TV and the recording lights off thing, that's not supposed to happen when I'm occupying the room. So,
Well,
but I
to
could tell you what's more amazing than the home automation
uh-huh.
system, and that's my server automation system because this thing is insane. If I do
Okay.
say so myself, it's an Ansible system with like 330 individual files in it currently, just to give you an idea of its size and scope.
Okay.
And I am going to be releasing it publicly. I just don't know exactly when. It should have happened by now, but I have like a really old version out there that's just so old that it's barely worth looking at. But essentially, I use Ansible Pull. I'm sure you've probably heard of it. Most people haven't. Ansible Pull. Have you used it?
No, I've never messed around with it.
It's the only way I'll use Ansible now.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of people will roll their eyes when I say that, but when you have servers, laptops, and desktops, and you're managing all three with one Ansible, setup, essentially, I call it NodeForge, which is my internal name for it, and it operates differently depending on which one it's on. But the problem is, if I have like an Ansible server, my laptop's in my bag, then I'm going to get errors that I can't configure my laptop. Well, yeah, my laptop's in my bag. Of course you can't get to it. It's not supposed to be configured right now. And that was kind of hard to figure out how to make it so that it didn't care if something could be off or if something wasn't supposed to be off and it was that I needed to be alerted on it. So with Ansible Pull, I can give it a Git repository and say, run this localhost. So it's just Ansible Pull, I think it's dash uppercase U off the top of my head, and then a Git repository URL. And inside that repository should be a file named local.yml, and that's like the file it'll run. So every machine basically checks that out and runs it against themselves. But if you add the -o option, it changes it to only if you have made a commit. So it's not going to do anything unless you've actually made a commit to the Git repository. So you don't have Ansible jobs running over and over again when they don't need to be. You can make it so that you push a change out to your repository, and then all of your machines will download them and run them. And for me, that makes a lot more sense because, my laptop in my bag, if I open it, then it's going to run the job as soon as it wakes up. That's fine. And then I use healthchecks.io to let me know if any of them haven't checked in a long time, then I could go in and find out. So that way nobody can quietly fail either. And I think I've spent 2 or 3 years, I've been exclusively Ansible pull.
Wow. For anyone who
And
doesn't know, just quick explanation of what Ansible is.
oh, for me, yeah. So Ansible is a configuration management solution similar to Chef and Puppet, but where it really excels is that it's much more lightweight. Whereas with Chef and Puppet, you have an agent that you install, you have a server where your configs are stored. The agent could sometimes be kind of heavy because it's always running local. Whereas Ansible, generally what people will have is a control host, as they call it, where you have, the server has SSH, the client installed, and it just connects to the individual servers that you want to set up. So if you have a web server, it'll SSH into the web server. It'll run the playbooks, which is what it's called. It's a configuration management link. Well, maybe not so much configuration management, but it's its own language. It's kind of a long story to get into, but it's a language that's understood, and it's not specific to Ansible, and it's easy to write in,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very logical too. I think most people can look at it and kind of tell what it's doing. They don't have to know a programming languages. So with that simplicity and the fact that it doesn't need an agent because it's just connecting to individual machines, I feel like that gives it a major edge over those other solutions.
Mm-hmm.
But on my end, I use Ansible pull, which is this additional binary that you get if you install Ansible. So if you have Ansible installed, you already have this. Then that's just a way of kind of doing the reverse, where you're saying, I don't want anything to connect to my server. I want my server to pull down the configs and then run it against itself, which is effectively creating an agent system, let's be honest, which
Mm-hmm.
kind of invalidates some of Ansible, but you still maintain the ease of the language of the YAML and how lightweight it is. You get all of those benefits still with that method. So that's my variation of it, which I'll show off at some point when I get around to doing a NodeForge video, which is on my list. But it'll definitely be this year. And then what I plan on doing is just opening it up into public so people can just download it and just see how I configure servers if they're curious.
Mm-hmm. So, well, what made you want to do this? And I guess also what made you want to do the Home Assistant stuff as well?
So the first answer is YouTube. YouTube made me
Sure.
get obsessed with configuration management because I had one computer when I started, and I was getting really, really tired of erasing it, trying a distribution, installing it, putting all my files back on there, just using this computer and just every week trying something new. I was a distro hopper by profession, I guess. It just got really old. So eventually I just wanted a way to reconstruct my setup without having to do any of the work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where this began. So now it'll set all of my GNOME keyboard shortcuts. It'll change my wallpaper in GNOME. It'll change what's on the lock screen, all the configuration items within the GNOME desktop, pretty much right down to trying to think what I haven't. Like extensions are a part of this even. And then Mate, and then the Sway window manager is in here as well. So I have all these different configurations. So if I want to restore a system back to where I want it to be that is set up the way I want it, then I could easily do that. Now I have multiple systems and I don't have to do this, but then, it became a business and now I have servers. So this thing I was using to manage my own laptops then graduated and became the software that basically runs everything.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
And with Home Assistant, I think it's just kind of like the Star Trek effect. When you're just looking at Star Trek, oh wow, they can just talk to things and they have all these automated things. Wouldn't that be so cool? I think it's the child in me watching Star Trek that gets to play around with technology that is not nearly as good as it was in Star Trek, but even if it's 10% as good, I guess I'll take it.
Maybe it's just that I don't really have that, like, Star Trek, just sci-fi background in general. I'm not like a big sci-fi guy. When I look at
Hmm.
the like home automation stuff, home assistant, I'm like, that's neat, I guess. But
Right.
outside of, well, I could see value in my case for automatically setting up my recording stuff. That
Hmm.
would make sense. Like turning my lights on, turning my camera on. That makes sense to me. But when it comes to
Hmm.
just doing my general home, like I don't know,
It's
for me it just doesn't.
something that stacks.
Right.
Like you're not going to find a value in one light being automated. I mean, how much time are you saving by not flipping the switch yourself? Let's be
Mhm.
honest. I mean, you could argue that there's probably time negative, but when you add different things, I feel like you're creating more comfort, and it's
Mm.
kind of a weird mind trick because your lights are automatically coming on at sunset. So your house is changing itself to match your environment. Motion sensors, like my last studio had a motion sensor in there, so it turned on the computer, it would turn on the television. Basically, all my computers would come on, the lights, everything.
Mhm.
I had the fan in that room have a heat curve like PCs do. So I had a temperature monitor and it would cut the ceiling fan on if the temperature was above like 80. And then if it got down to like 70 something, they would cut the fan off. And you had the fan coming on and off along with the temperature. So the more you keep
Mhm.
adding these things, the more I think it kind of makes sense, but it's more the sum of all the parts and less so any one individual thing. Because to your point, the recording thing is pretty cool, but there's always going to be some individual things that'll throw you for a loop. Like my camera, I have a dumb battery,
Yeah,
which
I do
if
as well.
someone doesn't know is just you could just plug it in and your camera thinks it's a battery, but it's plugged into a wall, so you never have to charge anything. It has this warning that it's not a legit battery, and I have to actually in the menu go up and press OK.
Mhm.
Otherwise the camera can't be used, which completely defeats the entire automation because it comes on with the automation, but you can't use it until you get up and you go over to it and
What
then you hit
camera
the
do you have?
button. So the one that you're seeing me on right now is the ZVE10, and
Mhm.
then I have the A6600 as the primary camera that I have. So I have those two. This is my close-up cam when I'm doing close-ups on the videos.
Mhm.
But normally it's the A6600 that you're seeing me on.
Which one's the one
Both
that
Sony
complains about the
cameras.
battery?
What's that?
Which one's the one that complains about the fake battery?
That would be the A6600.
Okay.
So I was talking to my friend Tom, and we're thinking, should we just like make an actuating arm with a Raspberry Pi that when you turn it on, it just turns a thing and then it hits the. I don't think we're going to go through that much trouble because that's when you start to get to a point where you're putting way too much work into this
Right,
and
right.
you're sucking the value out of it. So we decided not to. We'll get up and hit the button. It's
Yeah,
fine.
if you spend 10 hours of work to save 3 seconds, like how long is it gonna take to recover that time?
But if somebody wants to hack the firmware, I won't be angry. Just saying, if it's
Yeah.
legal. I'm not trying to get anyone in trouble, but well, it is Sony, so forget I said anything.
Now I was only asking because I've got a Canon camera that doesn't have that issue. So I maybe it's Sony that wants to just add an extra protection in there.
Well, I'm not a Sony apologist. I like them, but I got them on clearance, so I'm not going to
Right,
say
that's
that I
fair.
made this long decision to get a camera with lots of research. It was cheap at the time, and it was at Best Buy. They're trying to get rid of them, so I grabbed some cameras, and that's what it was. But if I was going to research, I probably would not have gone with Sony. The menus are so hard. I mean, you can't even like export your settings.
Mhm.
Like I like to have known good settings, like export my settings so I can import them back in.
Mhm.
No, you take screenshots with your phone. That's how you do it. So that's basically how it goes. Which yay Sony, I guess. But is once you get them set up and just leave them alone, they're fine.
Yeah, yeah. That's how I feel as well. I don't touch my camera settings. I like every couple of months I'm like, maybe I should tweak a little bit, and then
Hmm.
I don't look at it again. Like I don't know what my settings are right now. I don't need to know what they are. I know they are fine. They're not
I
great.
I obsess over audio personally, so it's like
Yeah.
what's your obsession with your equipment? Like what gear do you have to tweak the most? I'm curious.
Um my probably yeah, probably audio. Um probably audio. Like I've messed around with like the EQ a ton of times, and I can never get it to a point where I'm perfectly happy. A big one for me is also like just little things like the distance of the mic away from my face and
Right.
how it's angled, like how it looks on the recording. Like, do I want it to be like this? Do I? And I actually need to replace this arm because this arm is a little
You
bit
made it a lot
flaky.
easier on yourself. I made it harder on myself by mandating I didn't want the microphone in the frame. And when you make that decision, you are increasing the difficulty level to
Yeah.
a uncomfortable level. But I was determined to
Hmm.
make that happen, and it took months to figure it out how to make it work. But I'm not recommending that. Absolutely not. But
What does
I
your
guess
setup look
your
like? What
point.
are you going on?
So I have like I forgot the name of the microphone. It's a Audio Technica, one of those long numbers. It's basically a shotgun hypercardioid,
I
if I'm
have
even
one
saying.
in my closet that I'm not using right now. I need to mess around with it a bit more.
It goes into a channel strip, which goes into an audio interface, which then goes into a dedicated computer for recording
Right,
because I like
right.
to have the recording PC for taking all the footage in, so I don't have to, it's like an appliance basically. And I don't like to see, cables, so I always run the cables through the walls
Oh,
and,
you
just
hate
try to make
my
sure you
my
can't
setup.
see
I can
anything.
see a
And
cable on the floor back under this arm.
I've seen it's fine. Nobody has to go to the obsessive level that I do. It's fine to see a microphone. There's no problem with it whatsoever. It's so much easier to deal with. It's a lot less work because
Mhm.
when you deal with distance, when you're trying to get it out of the frame, then you have to deal with a whole bunch of acoustic issues. It's
Yeah, yeah.
I've learned more about audio than I feel like I ever wanted to doing this.
I I'll mess around with the software stuff, but I need to mess around with like more like I've been wanting to like put foam up for a long time because I do have an echo problem in this room. Um, I've just mitigated it with the Shure SM7B, which is a god microphone. It
Just
so
put a just put a, foam behind your monitor, call it a day. Like, people overdo the
That's fair.
foam thing. It's like, I'll get the question a lot on the YouTube channel. They're like, when they saw my previous studio, like, "Why do you not have foam behind you?" And then I'll answer, "Well, my audio's not going behind me. I'm talking towards the camera, so I don't need anything back there." I mean,
Mhm.
sure, if your sound signal's bouncing off of walls, you might need that kind of thing, but I look at some of the people that do this, and I'm like, "Wow, you have a lot of foam padding here." I think, like, recording artists, probably some of them probably have less than you.
Mhm. That's
So,
fair.
I think it's kind of overkill. Like, sometimes they'll make these little tiny foam shields just put behind your microphone,
Mhm.
like, literally the microphone, and the sound can't bounce back because it's being, hit right then and there before it
Mhm.
even leaves the microphone. But then again, audio, if you have a different kind of microphone where the pickup pattern is, around you, then that's
Mhm.
not gonna help you. It's just all these things. And it was the most frustrating thing to learn, and if I could go back, I would have hired somebody to just set it up for me and called it a day. Like, it was way too long. Like, there's people that would love to get an hourly, rate to in exchange for helping you figure this out.
Mhm.
And, yeah, if you get to my level of obsession, just let someone else deal with it. That's what I'm
Yeah.
telling myself anyway. I'll probably still mess with it.
Yeah, I know. Like every so often, like I'll get just like an itch to change something. Usually, it'll make it any better. It's like it is usually just as good in a slightly different way, and it'll be such a
Yep.
subtle change. This is the other problem. This is what we were saying before about like making sure your videos are perfect. You can make a very subtle change that nobody else is going to notice. Like it'll be
Right.
like a 1% like change in your sound signature. And at the moment you'll be like, this is so much better. You listen back to it and you're like, this sounds exactly the same. What am I doing?
Yeah, man, this first of all, what are you doing? I would say not to obsess over that level because if no one notices, then there's probably no point. But I feel also there might be value if you have a certain like sound in your head you want to get to,
Right,
and you
right.
want to kind of like incrementally get to that point. Yeah, I can totally see that being a good thing to tweak things constantly. But you just I feel like you just have to have an idea what you want it to sound like and then try to get it there and then call it good.
Mhm.
But then the problem with me is I just moved studios, so I had to go through all that again. So that took months to tune it, and it's still not where I want it.
Mhm.
So it's Again, I probably could have hired somebody that would have probably set it all up in 1 hour, would have been done with it,
Mhm,
probably someone that's good at this kind of thing, like I'm not.
mhm.
But, yeah, I hear you. The audio thing is pretty annoying, but once you get it good, it's fine.
Mm.
It's just you just sit back and listen, "That sounds good."
So one
So
thing you mentioned earlier is if you make like a video on Bash or Tmux or something like that,
mhm.
the content is probably not going to change. Now, another
Right.
thing you have is you have we mentioned before that you've written some books.
Mhm.
Um, so where is it on your website? Where can I find it?
There should be a book section. I just changed it, just now. Actually, go under shop, I believe. Bear with
Under
me.
shop? Ah,
I
yep,
think
yep.
it's under
Okay,
there.
sweet.
Yep.
Yeah, so you have this Mastering Ubuntu Server book, and you've written multiple editions of it as well.
Yep. Yep.
That's
It's incredible. I
when
still can't believe that happened.
when was the first edition released?
I don't even remember what year it was, honestly.
Mhm.
I'd have to Google it. I have no idea. I mean, I know it wasn't 2014. It would have to be 2016, 27. No. Huh, good question. You got me. I don't even know when the first edition came out. This
Well,
seems like forever ago.
where I was going with this is like I imagine the content of the book doesn't change that much between editions. I obviously there's going to be different maybe some different tech you want to mention that maybe is being used at that point, but the
Right.
general like the general things like using apps and all that sort of stuff, like the core of using Ubuntu is going to be basically the same. So I'm sure a lot of
Mhm.
people have like always ask you like, why have you made multiple editions? Like, what's the point of having more than just one of them? So I guess just
Hmm.
explain like why there even needs to be different editions.
Well, first of all, there's gonna be, like, the little things that change that kinda bother people because even if it's just one little thing, you're going through a section of the book and then something doesn't work, and it could be that there's a very easy, like, answer, maybe a flag isn't in there anymore, and that's defeating to somebody that's reading a book and feeling like they're making progress and they get stuck on something. They're not gonna know if it's because they did something wrong or I mean, it's too easy for a book to say, "If you find a error, let us know." Nobody knows if it's an error or not. They don't
Right.
know if it's them or if it's the person writing it that's the problem. So, I think it's keeping it consistent with reality. My line of thinking is if people were to ask me, "Should I buy the new edition?" I'd probably say no, unless I mean, if you've already read the current one, then there probably isn't a reason to read the new one because, to your point, things don't really, change all that much. But when they do, it's always something totally frustrating. The first edition, if I remember correctly, it was OwnCloud to NextCloud, happened, like, weeks after publication, and I was like, "Darn it."
Oh.
I was like, "Darn it." I almost could have just and I yeah, that was not a good moment, but it was okay. It didn't create a big problem or anything like
Mhm.
that, but sometimes these little things happen or my personal favorite, Ubuntu changes the installer at the end, so I have to go and redo all the screenshots of the first chapter that I've taken, like, many months before because, "Oh, they're not gonna touch the installer." They never touch the installer, they just touched the installer, they just changed it, so
Which edition was
those
that
kinds of
with?
things. What's that?
What edition was that with?
That was with the, live installer, the new server installer with, I believe that was 2204 or was that 2004? I believe 2004 it was more of like a preview, 2204 it was kinda
So was
more of a
that
thing.
the newest edition of the book then? We had to deal with that?
Yeah, well, yeah, that change happened with the previous edition,
Okay,
I
right,
think that
right,
was kinda where it started, but basically it was like 40 screenshots in the previous installer because it's the classic Debian installer that had, like, like, how many steps, right? And you have to take a picture of each one, and it's kinda hard to not make it the illustrated guide to installing Ubuntu at that point, so I
right.
was kinda happy to see that they changed it so the number of screenshots could be cut down to a reasonable number.
Hmm.
But still, it's additional work to do, so it's kinda just keeping it current, I think is the best thing. There really isn't much more to it than that.
Hmm.
It's just basically making sure that if somebody is going in there for the first time, that what they see is gonna match reality and not, frustrate somebody.
Hmm. Yeah, that's always going to be a concern with anytime you're writing an unchanging piece like this. Like a book is obviously the worst example of it, but like a video as well. Like you put out a video, for example, and it's like, here's a video on Tmux, for example, and what you say
Yep.
on
Sorry.
Tmux is gonna.
I'm so sorry. My throat's getting dry.
No, no, it's all good. It's all
Go
good.
ahead.
If you make a
Yep.
video on Tmux, like what you say now is going to be relevant for the current version of Tmux, and you could always make a newer Tmux video and remove the old one. But with a book, there's always going to be those older editions floating around out there,
Right.
and there's always
Yep.
going to be like the secondhand book market, all of that sort of stuff. So it's really hard to make sure the content is up to date, unlike, say, a wiki, for example, where
Right.
if you go to a
Yep.
wiki, the current version is always going to be the version that is shown.
Yep. Yeah. That then you could just edit it. I used to maintain a wiki for the channel before I combined it to the blog.
Mhm.
I'd like to see books be more like that. I almost feel like the edition thing is a little archaic for tech because, we could have like a fourth edition of something and then like there's a minor change and it's not worth someone buying a new book, but we still want them to have that experience. We could do a point one release and just give everyone a, updated PDF or ebook or something like that, which
Mhm.
is kind of, but the way it is now, I guess the cadence of Ubuntu LTS releases is probably fine enough for it to be additions, but some software moves really fast. Like they kept trying to get me to cover the interim releases. I'm like, do you have any idea how bad of an idea that would be to cover an interim release in a book? You'll have a 9 month shelf life. Like, I don't think you want that.
Right, right.
So they have to talk them down sometimes from some of these ideas. It's been fun. There's lots of behind the scenes shenanigans going on when you're writing books. It's
Mhm.
always lovely.
What made you actually want to write the book in the first place?
I like writing for some
Okay.
reason. I don't know what it is. It's just like satisfying. I love structure and I just love the writing process. And I'm not gonna say I'm like an expert at when it comes to writing or anything because I could release something not so great and the editor can make it look good. I feel like I'm decent though,
Mhm.
but it's just something very satisfying about it. And it kind of just happened just out of nowhere. I got an email early in the life of the YouTube channel from someone from the publisher, just like, "Do you want to write a book?" And I'm like, "Yeah, this is a scam. They're going to ask for money or something and just totally disappear." That's what I thought. So I checked the email headers and they were legit. I'm like, okay, like so either someone got control of their email account or it's real. And then it's like they want to give me money, really? Like that's what we have to go through when we get something from eBay to know that it's actually legit. I mean, not eBay. I meant to say YouTube.
Mhm.
eBay is another discussion altogether. But no, anyway, little stutter problem there. But no, seriously, when it comes to these types of things, it's just I don't know, so much to keep track of, I guess.
Mhm.
Especially when you're writing about something and things are changing right from underneath your feet. Most of those books are written when Ubuntu Server was in development. So I was writing it and changing it along with them changing Ubuntu Server in development. So it's like this catch-up game up until release. So
Mhm. I'm sure now that you have like the general structure down and like the things that don't really change, like, it's a
yeah,
lot easier to write the new edition. But
no,
no,
it's actually it's harder. It's way
okay.
harder, but not because of the writing itself. It's the when it comes to the publisher, I feel like they often make it harder than they need to. It's you just have to look for things like someone in the editing team changes all the double quotes and the commands to a different one. I'm like, no, 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 you don't understand. If somebody copies and pastes this from the PDF into a terminal, they're going to get an answer. We can't have the double quotes that way. They have to be this way, and then I have to micromanage them because I mean, even though they're a tech book company and this is what they do, there's so many things with tech books that you don't run into when you have a normal like a fiction story. You have two characters talking, who cares? But like communication is communication. They're having a conversation. There's grammar, there's sentence structure. But when you're talking about, this command is camel case, this command isn't, this option is uppercase, this one isn't, this one is double quotes, single quotes, backticks, and all these different things. You have to micromanage those things.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure if it's the publisher or whatever it is, but it's that process I think is at least for me, the longest part of the whole thing because I just don't want that book to go out and then somebody have all these problems.
Right.
It's like I'm going to micromanage that thing to death until they hate me, and then it comes out.
Mhm. So I guess when you wrote the first edition, how long did that take you?
6 or 7 months,
And like
roughly.
6 or 7 months working on it, how much a week you would say?
Mm, I'd say at least 2 to 3 hours a day, depending. But I like to do things in bulk, which is kind of hard to say or hard to judge. So I might record like 12 YouTube videos in like a day, and
Right,
then
right. Yeah,
like
I do the same
edit
thing.
them through a month or something like that. I could sit down and dedicate a day to writing and write 4 or 5 chapters that day, and then never touch it again for another week, and not even and just submit those chapters and just take a little break or something, then come
Right, that's
back
why
in and
I asked you like
do
for the
another.
week
Yeah.
or instead of per day, because I did the same thing.
Yeah, it's the only way that ever works for me because I don't believe in multitasking. It's just big belief that I have. We can only do one thing at the same time, and if we tell somebody we multitask, what we're telling them is we're good at putting something down, picking up something else, doing that, and then going back to the first thing again. That's not multitasking. That's still doing one thing at a time.
Hmm.
So I feel often, at least for me, by just getting as much of one thing done as I can, then that one thing is not gonna come back for a while, and
Yeah.
it's gone for a week. I don't even have to think about it. Then I could do this thing and dedicate a day to that thing, and then that thing's done, and then
Yep.
that's
Yep.
like
Yep.
the only way I can ever get through my workload.
I do the exact same thing. I generally spend like all of Monday like planning out the videos for the week. Then
Yep.
like all of Tuesday I'm recording all day. All of Wednesday I'm recording whatever's left over. Uh, and then basically the rest of it after that is just editing. I like to do it in very clear chunks like that. Just to
Do you have a B-roll day ever? Because that's something I've been having to do.
I don't really need that much B-roll for what I do because most of it is like I'm showing off software. So I guess like usually the B-roll I can record like as I'm recording the video. Um,
I'll give you a pro tip. Like, do you
okay.
do you tr do you script at all?
Yeah, I don't like hard script it, but it's like general like here's the points I need to hit on. It's become more and more of a script as I've been going.
Script the off-camera parts.
Mm-hmm.
Don't script the on-camera parts. Script the B-roll parts,
Mm-hmm.
and just so what I'll do is I'll have it written on paper exactly the way I want to say it.
Right.
And there's nothing but me and the microphone. I'm recording only audio, and I just have this piece of paper in front of me, and I am reading it. And then I go back to the computer, I play it back, and I reenact everything that I said, and then I lay that one track down on top of the audio track. Done, just
Mm-hmm.
like that. That's one trick that I've kind of picked up, but I guess if I'm more B-roll heavy, I don't know if I would be than your content, but I feel like for me that works really well because I hear myself talking. I'm like, oh, I'm talking about this thing, so I got to do that thing, and then I just lay it down on top of the audio track. And then because it's written, then I feel like in that case you have less editing because you don't. You said something about rambling before, and I did the same thing. I don't have to worry about it because I wrote it. I
Right.
just read what I wrote, and I'm done. And then, but the on-camera parts, I don't like to script because you could tell if my eyes are going back and forth, I'm probably not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's that like if I'm just addressing the camera, it's fine. But when it's the technical stuff, I like to write that side and then kind of tell a story and to kind of show where they're supposed to be and what's supposed to go on.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes just having a like those little things can just go a long way in helping you make content because it's like just saves time. It's just even if it saves like 5 minutes, it just goes so far.
Hmm. Maybe I'll try that out for a couple of videos. Just see how it goes.
It takes a while to get used to it, trust me.
Mhm.
But once you do, and only certain videos will work this way. Like reviews will work very well this way because I could just create the B-roll. I have a B-roll day is when I'm reviewing a hardware product and then another hardware product. It's like I'll just record the B-roll for all of it in one day just
Mhm.
because I'm doing it anyway. Set up the camera, do all the B-roll, save it, and then I go to edit it and it's already right there. So I don't have to, set up my product lights and then take them down multiple times. Just get it all done in one day and call it good.
Hmm.
Um, but that's just me being oppositional to what people call multitasking. Multitasking. So,
No, I get it. I
but
get it. That's
real.
fair. Because I will often like record the demo of what I'm showing like while I'm talking, and it's something
Mhm.
I've gotten used to, and it's caused issues in the past where I've like had to like redo takes, and I don't know. Like
Yeah.
I get what you're saying as well.
Well,
Like that makes sense for a way to
the,
do it as well.
the
Maybe
TMUX
maybe
videos, the TMUX videos and those kinds of tutorials cannot be done that way
right.
because you don't know that you're not going to get an apt install error, right? You don't know that there's going to be a mirror issue or something like that. So there's going to be some content where that just will not work. But
Mhm.
if it's like, you reviewed a product, you already know what you want to say, you spent the time with it, just at that point it becomes a lot easier. But
Mhm.
then again, it's YouTube, so whether or not anyone will see the review video, I guess all that work. But that's just what we go through, I guess.
Yeah, well, it is what it is.
Yep.
So, when you said you started using Linux in 2002, is that right?
Mhm. Yep, roughly, yeah,
Okay.
somewhere. It was a college class I took around that time.
Yeah, I was
Around the
gonna
time that Star Wars Episode 2 came out on DVD, around the time I was finishing my first Linux class. There you go. If you do the math, you'll have the exact time period.
I was gonna ask you like what that introduction was like because that's a very different time period for Linux. Like again, that's
Oh, yeah.
before Ubuntu was a thing. That was before Red Hat Enterprise Linux. It was still Red Hat Linux back then. Like
Oh, yeah.
what
It
was
was
what was Linux back like back then and like yeah, how did you
it was it was so amazing, like, the class. It was when I was going to college, then I was curious about Linux, and I
Mhm.
looked into it, and I saw the distributions. I'm like, "I don't have time for that," and I just said, "No."
Right.
So I'm not doing that. There's too many distributions. I don't really wanna go
Too
through all
many
that and research
2002.
all these.
Yeah.
And so I kind of gave up on it, unfortunately. So fast forward that same year, I'm taking a Unix class, and I'm really enjoying it. And this guy comes in, is like, I'm gonna be teaching Linux next semester as a demo class if anyone wants to try it out. So I was like the first one. I'm like, yes, okay, because I figure I could try Linux and have someone else tell me what distribution to use might be better, because I just want the instruction at this point. So the class was amazing. I feel like he did it the way it should be done. The first day of class, he gives everyone a hard drive.
Mhm.
And he says, "This is your Linux install. It's your Linux install. You're going to put your name on it. You're going to maintain it, and you'll come in. You put it in the computer. Had a removable hard drive bay on the front, so you just slide your hard drive in there with your name on it. Boot it up. There's your
Mhm.
OS. When you're done, you shut it down. Take it out." So he had to maintain the Linux install throughout the class. And one of the first projects was, first assignments was, we had to choose a desktop for the class between GNOME and KDE, and it was an hour of arguing. And my first taste of this, right? These people didn't even know Linux yet. They didn't even have any idea. And they're shown two interfaces between KDE and GNOME, and they have to choose. And we went with KDE because it looks so much cooler than GNOME. Like, GNOME looks boring. We don't want to use that. Let's use KDE. And that's what we did. So it was just so much fun to learn the way that he taught it. But it was so hard because when we first install it, you don't have internet access. Like, you'll have a
Mm.
network card, you'll have the network driver, but you had to manually set up the route to the internet, and all these things, like, when you first install it. So you didn't even have like a working internet connection out of the box like you do now. NVIDIA driver, forget it. I mean, you're going to be tempting fate if you want to go ahead and do that. So it was tough. I mean, it was very, very tough, but I like a challenge. So for me, it was fine. I didn't really care. I just didn't want to choose a distribution, but I didn't mind a challenge learning Linux, I guess.
Mhm. I was trying to find a
And
good
then the rest
screenshot
is
of
history.
I was trying to find a good screenshot of KDE 2. Yeah, that
Oh gosh.
I
They had this window border. They had like dragon wings on the right-hand side or something like that. I've never seen a theme that cool again since.
the funny thing about it is I can see a lot of modern plasma in it, which is kind of funny. Like obviously there's been a lot of rework, but think like the way the what do you call it? Like the virtual desktop display, the
Yep.
that is the same thing now, it's just styled differently.
Yeah, Plasma doesn't change. I mean, it changes a lot, but it doesn't.
Wait, I just realized it used to use Windows style icons for the like full screen stuff before swapping over to the arrows that it uses. Can we just go back to what it had before? I think that was better. Can we? I
Well,
I hate
yeah,
the
we
arrow
still
for
have Trinity, don't
maximize,
we? Or Trinity is KDE 3. It's not
something like
exactly
that.
KDE 2. I don't know if that does that still a thing? I haven't heard
Yeah,
about that
it
in a
is. It's
while.
just not.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it's not doing too much. But I really don't like the up arrow for maximize and down arrow for minimize on modern plasma with like at least the Breeze
Oh
theme.
gosh, it's funny how they simplified it when I mean, it looks good, but I felt like before it looked just not necessarily better, but in its time period, it just stood out more. And I feel like now it's either Windows is stealing from KDE or KDE is stealing from Windows. I'm pretty sure Windows 11 looked pretty much nearly exactly like KDE 5 in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
So it's kind of interesting to see that borrowing ideas back and forth when it looked so original back then. But it's
Mhm.
always been a great desktop. It's just interesting the direction it went.
So you mentioned the desktop you guys went with, but what distro was it at the time?
It was Red Hat. Red Hat
Ah, okay.
7.2, or I think it was 7.2. We went to 7.3 during the class, or it could have been 7.1 and we went to 7.2.
No, I don't
Because I
want.
know that at some point Red Hat 8 came out, and then 9, and then I was using, after the class was over, I was using Red Hat 10 beta until it turned to Fedora, which I don't know if a lot of people knew that it was Fedora 1 was Red Hat 10 for up until
Mhm.
like the 2 weeks or a month before release, and they changed it all of a sudden.
Yeah, again, for anyone listening, we're talking about Red Hat Linux, not Red Hat Enterprise Linux. This is back before Enterprise Linux existed.
Yep.
This is
That's
back
all
when
they that's
it
what they had.
in the
Red Hat Linux.
in the earlier versions, it Red Hat Linux was also called Red Hat Commercial Linux.
Hmm. I think at one point I had the box DVD and everything. Fun times. It was such a different time, and I remember like people were like, how'd you get on the internet? We've been trying. We can't figure it out." I'm like, "I did this," and I like, "Oh, well, now we're online." It was
Mhm.
just, and nowadays it's like we have a live image and we're online from pretty much get go.
Unless you're using some like weird it's some weird network device, most things just work. Like there are some
Right.
exceptions for weird laptops, but if it has an Intel card, it just works. Or
Right.
like
And if it doesn't
almost
have an
always.
Intel card, just make it have an Intel card because it's easier to do that than deal with Broadcom drivers. It's like, it's funny. I see people just try to force their Wi-Fi card to work on Linux. I'm like, just go on eBay, $12, buy an Intel card and call it a day. You won't even have a problem again, unless it's a Lenovo and they brick your computer if you swap your Wi-Fi card. I always hate that. But the Wi-Fi issue, that's I remember when it was like a network card issue in general. It didn't even matter if you had a Wi-Fi card. Anything networking was hard.
Mhm.
And then now it's just a few naughty providers of network cards that are Wi-Fi cards that don't play nice upstream. But
Mhm.
I guess I'll take that if that's our biggest problem.
So what were you? So when you went to go study, what was your intention with doing that before like obviously the Linux class came along?
I don't think I had it figured out back then. I knew I liked computers, but
Mhm.
I don't know if I really had it figured out what in particular I wanted to do. I think I was really fixating on programming at the time because that was pretty much the only thing equivalent to DevOps back then. I hate to use the word DevOps and talking about programming, but I'm learning C++ and having a lot of fun and thinking I'm going to be a developer, but I liked it, but I didn't like it at the same time. It's like I felt like something was missing. And I think
Mhm.
Linux was that missing piece, but then I ended up liking that more than programming. So now programming is more of a hobby and Linux is what I do. So I kind of like that better because I can write code and not really care because I'm just doing it for fun. But then when it comes to Linux, it just became my hyper focus. I couldn't It's like, yes, this is it. Like I knew. And then at the time, people were like, well, there's barely any jobs. Why would you want that? I mean, you'd be lucky to find one job for a Linux admin. I'm like, I don't care. Like back then, it was hard to find a Linux admin job. You'd be lucky to see one on a job ad in your area. If and it was literally that rare. And then now it's like you type Linux admin or DevOps, and you have like pages upon pages of results. It's kind of funny all the people telling me that it's not going to amount to anything and there's no jobs. And I'm like, I don't care. It's fun. That's what I want to do. And now it's like it went a completely different direction. I guess I got really lucky. It wasn't an analysis thing. I didn't know it was going to be huge. I'm like, that's what I want. If it takes me longer to find a job, so what? And
It
then
is
it
kind
just
of funny
took
that
off forever.
you had that impression of it. Like obviously it was still really new at that point. It had only been around what was it 96 that Linux started? Am I getting the year wrong? Uh,
Yeah. I know you'd find Windows admin jobs that have
Yeah,
like a bit of Linux in it or something
but
like that would come up every now and then, but just Linux admin, that was hard to find.
where I was going with that is there was a lot of Unix work that would have still existed at that point, and nowadays most of the Unix work that exists is a lot of
Oh,
legacy stuff. So the fact and the internet was obviously becoming this bigger thing. So you have like when Linux came along, it was a perfect opportunity because
Mhm.
obviously these Unix systems were often like expensive, they were on dedicated hardware, and then Linux comes along as the internet's coming along, and it's this free thing, and people want to host websites now they don't have to pay for anything, so they can install this thing. And obviously it took a little bit of time for that stuff to like come along, but once it
Yep.
was there, you have this free thing that anybody can use, and you can just run a website, and boom, perfect time for it to happen. If it was any later, I don't think Linux would have had as much of a massive like impact as it did. I feel like obviously it probably would have picked up steam over time, but being there as the internet was being adopted, I think was what really helped Linux in its early days.
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty good point. Yeah, I would say that definitely helped it out. But I think it's I don't know if this helped it out at all, but it had this rebel mentality that I don't think it has now.
Mhm.
Like back then, it was like you have these the big software companies doing what they're doing, and you have these renegades are just coming in there and doing what
Right,
they
there
do
was
for
Windows
free and
Refund
making it
Day.
look easy, even though it's not easy. But they're producing this, and they had this like oppositional vibe to them, even though that really wasn't what they were trying to do. They're developing software that's for a purpose,
Yeah.
but everyone thought of them like the renegades, the rebels, or like
Mhm.
the software vigilantes. They're coming in here with this crazy new license and trying to do things differently, and they're doing what Unix is doing, but you could download it and you don't have to like call anybody or have a license key. It was just incredible. And nowadays, I think we kind of take it for granted. I kind of miss that
Mhm.
rebel mentality that it had back then.
Yeah, as I said in there, like Windows Refund Day happened, where people went to Microsoft and
Oh,
demanded money back for their keys they didn't need because they were going to run Linux.
that was so incredible. I have not thought about that in so long, but I do remember that. It was so hilarious
When
when
was?
people
What
would
year
talk
was that?
about their experiences calling Microsoft and asking for their money back when their license came with the computer or
Mhm.
something. It was just so funny. That was a good time. Or that
I.
was all probably back when you had Windows XP that would come on the computer if it's a business computer, with the Windows Vista DVD that nobody used if you wanted to upgrade, but
Mhm.
everyone stayed on XP.
Mhm.
Fun
I guess
times.
I guess that goes to show like the change in audience of Linux. Like nowadays, it is a lot more like just regular people. Like it's not
Mhm.
just the people who are using Linux aren't necessarily like hardcore free software advocates. It's like you will find people who, myself included, will just like for a lot of people when I do this podcast, I have them on Discord. Like it's fine. I don't
Mhm.
really care. Or like I play a lot of video games and almost all video games are proprietary. And you've
Right.
you've got this very different audience now. Whereas if you go back to like those early days, you did have a lot of people who were like free software or death. Everything must be free
Right.
software. And
Right. Yeah. That's yeah. I'm
there's
sorry,
been
you're gonna say
a
something?
like toning down of the way that like people look at the software in this space. But
Right.
one thing I do want to mention about Linux is if you go back and read some of those early Linux emails, it was oftentimes Linux is great, but guys, just hold out longer for the free software kernel. The FSF is gonna finally get
Yep.
their kernel done. Like even up
Yeah.
to like the like 2000 2002, people were still waiting for the FSF to get their kernel done, and it just never happened. Even today, like it's
Right. Well,
still
it's the
not happened.
practicality is I mean, the practicality of the free software or die kind of thing, it doesn't really work. I mean, it's like good that it exists, and I love it. Okay,
Mhm.
so I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying you're against everyone. I mean, because you think about it like, how far are you willing to go with that? Are you willing to not have a Blu-ray player on your TV because you don't have the firmware code for it? So you decide not to watch movies. That's fine if you don't want to do that. I'm just
Mhm.
saying you're making that decision. Back when this movement came out, I'm thinking, well, your PlayStation 2 is an open source, but you're happily playing that. But God forbid it's your computer that's not open source, but nobody looks at the PlayStation and even bats an eye. So if you the free software, all the things, I mean, nowadays you might not even be able to have a microwave. But I'm not saying that justifies the fact that software isn't free. It's just like that's what we're up against. It's
Mhm.
like we have these appliances and these embedded systems and all these different things, which are probably running Linux, but they're not open source, which is kind of another rub altogether. But um, to make this movement happen, it's we got to be able to just get people interested in this that don't really care.
Mhm.
Nobody cares if they have a smart microwave that's going to like email their phone or something, and they change the operating system or they have the source code for it because it's going to
I don't
make
want
their
to.
popcorn pop that much
I
faster.
don't
But
want
nobody,
a microwave that even wants to email me. Can we? I
I
don't want a
don't
smart
even.
microwave. Can
Yeah.
we just don't do that, please?
Oh, no, no, no. I use that example because it's weird. I
I'm
don't
sure
even
it
want a computer
exists.
in the
That's the
car.
thing. That's the sad part.
Oh, I'm sure they exist, yeah, and I'm sure somebody's, writing a comment right now to let you know their favorite model of said microwave, but, um, I mean, but we have to get those people to care, and that's why it's hard because it's like trying to get someone to care about their software freedoms when all they wanna do is turn a box on and watch a movie or play a game and go to sleep, and that's as much as they care about it. That's what we have to try to crack, and that's what's always been hard because it's like, again, how far do you go with it? Do you say, "All my software on my computer has to be open source?" Well, what about your cell phone? You could just choose not to have a cell phone if you don't have the source code for it, but your employer might require you to have a cell phone, and if you don't have one, they might provide you with one, and you'll end up with a cell phone anyways. So it's just this weird world we live in where software choices are just in so many different directions than they were before. We had our computer and we had this dumb phone that looked like a calculator at the time, and now we have computers and everything, and it's like much more of a target for the Free Software Foundation to hit. I mean, at this point, I mean, what doesn't have a chip in it?
What are your
So
thoughts on the term? Not specifically on the movement itself, but on the term free software. Because I've always felt that the term itself has done nothing but made it more confusing for regular people. I've
it
said
is,
many
yeah.
times before, like the term, we can have, oh, well, free software doesn't mean free as in beer, it means free as in freedom. Like, if you have to
Right.
qualify what the word you're using means, I think you've already lost the first battle.
I think so too. Because I feel like with technologists, you had them at source code, right? I
Mhm.
mean,
Right.
I feel like a lot of tech people, even if they're not developers, they would probably like to look at the source code for something that they're using, not because they want to become a programmer, but because it's cool. Like you have this piece of software, you can kind of look at how it's written, and I think that having the source code is something that is very important. But at the same time, the proprietary versus not. I'm sorry, I think I'm getting off into a completely different tangent here. But when it comes
Good.
to the free software movement itself, it's it's just what I keep coming back to is it's just in practice is where it gets really hard. But the message when you go to the technologists, you had them at source code. You don't really have to convince them, and that's kind of where the point is I'm going to. You don't have to convince them that it's important to have the source code. They know, and they could probably tell you what source code does.
Mhm.
But the average person that's buying bread at the supermarket doesn't even know what source code is. And again, we go down to that because as technologists we care, but we have to find something that non-technologists care about. It has to be something we all care about, right?
Mhm.
If only some of us care about it, then how can we expect a change? We all have to care about it to make a case for this. And I think that's the part that they really haven't. It's like they're talking to the technologists. They're also talking to the non-technologists, but they're only within the range of technologists. So even if they release this white paper on why Windows is bad, the only ones seeing it are technologists. They're
Right.
not getting
Right.
that to the
You don't have
people
to
that
convince the people who
need
already
to
agree
see
with
it.
you.
Right, yeah, it's like you're preaching all they do is preach to the choir, and they do get a few people here and there that wouldn't have known about them, but you might be able to argue that those people might have been technology fans anyway. I mean, it's kind of funny when you think about people ask, like, "Why isn't Linux number 1? Why didn't the year the Linux desktop happen?" Because nobody cares. It's an operating system. Nobody has a conversation about operating systems. Like we do, you do, I do, we in the industry we do, but you're trying to tell me, the person who is not using a computer for their job cares what operating system they're using at home? They don't care. And honestly, it's like when you see these articles, Linux won't catch on because of this, and they have all these numbers. It's like people don't like change. That's it. It's that simple. You could give them a distribution that has 100% compatibility for every piece of software ever invented or will be invented, that runs all of your applications 10 times faster and has an interface that's so easy that there's no training classes for it because it's so simple that literally everybody just automatically knows how to use it. Like the best thing ever. Nobody uses it. Why? Because it's change. They don't want to change anything. And these are the people we're trying to talk to about the free software and why the source code is important. The same people that really don't know what Windows is other than that splash screen that comes up when they start their computer.
Mhm.
That's what we're up against, and that's who we have to educate. And unless we get them, then I mean we're just preaching to ourselves at that point.
Mhm.
And I think that's the biggest problem.
There is this Windows 10 survey that someone posted like 6 years ago. Microsoft was asking like, how likely are you to recommend Windows 10 to a friend or
I need you
colleague?
to understand that people don't have a conversation about operating systems, or so I've seen it. And
Yep,
that's where
yep,
I got
yep.
that. That's one of the things that inspired it too, because you can apply that to Linux, like how Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it's like I knew
Still
immediately what
good.
you're
I just
talking
want to
about.
bring that up.
Yeah, like a message comes up, how likely are you to recommend Windows 10 to a friend? And then, of course, the meme, just in case someone didn't hear it, is someone basically saying, I need you to understand that people don't generally have conversations about operating systems. And that to me tells you everything about the year of the Linux desktop and why it didn't happen. People
Mhm.
see an operating system as an appliance. Not very many people go in their car and wonder what OS it's using and whether it's open source or whether or not they can run a live image on their Ford. Nobody's trying to do that, right? But um, it's just interesting that how we come about this is different, but the message has to hit the people that need to hear it. Otherwise, it's just we got to make them care about it. And right now, again, they see it as an appliance. They get in their car, they drive it, they use their microwave, they put their milk in their fridge. They don't think about what OS is running. They're watching TV. They don't care what servers Netflix has in the back end. They don't care what system it is, what OS it's running on the TV. They
Mhm.
turn on the TV, they watch their show. They turn on their game system, their gaming PC, they play their game. We have to hit them right there. Otherwise, the only way that Linux will catch on the desktop is when the desktop itself dies out and its replacement comes.
Mhm.
That'll probably run Linux, and that's going to be what does it, unfortunately. But that's unfortunately the way I see it playing out. But ultimately, Linux doesn't care if it's successful or not. It's just going to happily exist in whatever form we want to use it in. And I think the fact that Linux doesn't care if it's successful in a desktop or I think that probably tells you everything you need to know. It's happily the way it is.
A good example of this is one of my roommates at the last place I was staying at. Uh, she was running a laptop that had shipped with Windows 7, and this was
Hmm.
like in 2022 or something like that, was still running Windows 7 and
Oh
was
wow.
running Word 2012 or something like that, because that's
Hmm.
what was on the device when she got it, or whatever year. Basically, she got the device when Windows 7 came. I don't remember the exact year, 14, 12, whatever, something in that range. A really outdated version, a really outdated OS, and she didn't even consider it a problem. It's just, this is what I have on my computer. This is my computer. This is how my computer
Yeah.
works. Like, I
Right.
don't know what an OS is. I don't know what software is. I just click the thing and it just does the thing.
Right. Like car mechanics aren't going to understand why nobody, or not nobody, but why some people don't care what kind of engine the car has. It gets them to work and back and does that without any problem. That's all they care about.
Mhm.
But to a mechanic, you have to know what engine is in that car. You got to know like what's going on in there. And I think that's how we approach technology. We want to know how it's built and we have this passion. And I feel like sometimes we'll assume everyone has the same passion as us.
Mhm.
And some people do, but people come at technology from different walks of life and some people care and some don't. But ultimately, when we could find something everyone has in common, like if Microsoft like has a big breach, I mean, even that doesn't seem to lower their desktop market share half the
Well, yeah,
time. So
Apple,
it's
like when
interesting.
Apple had like a big iCloud leak, no one really cared after a couple of days.
Right, right. So it's just the industry is changing, but we're just trying to, see what's going to change into. But it's almost like if we don't push it a certain direction, technology just goes its direction. And
Mhm.
I think Linux will definitely be a big part of that. And I think it'll probably outlast anything else. But I didn't know there'd be a Windows 11, and here we are.
You made a good point about whatever device comes after the desktop will likely be Linux based, and I think The Steam Deck
Yeah.
is like it's sort of an example in a direction of that, right? Because you can run the Steam
Mm.
Deck, have no idea what Linux is, and for the most part, if you just are in the Linux the Steam Deck game mode, you're just
Right.
playing games. Like, yeah, mate,
You don't even know what it's running. Yeah,
yeah,
it just
it
runs your
doesn't
games.
matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
That
think
doesn't
that
matter. Well, I see. I feel like we would have the next thing now,
Mhm.
and the reason why we don't is because of Thunderbolt.
What
Honestly,
is
because
your deal on Thunderbolt? I need to know this. I'm not sure what the problem is here.
well, Thunderbolt is just we had plug and play. Like nobody noticed we achieved this. Okay, with when USB 3 came out, unless it was a printer, it worked plug and play. Okay,
Okay.
but Thunderbolt it makes it hard, and so the way I see the future is the desktop is dead. I know this isn't what anyone wants to hear, but what will keep the desktop alive is gamers. So for gamers, it'll be alive. Like when people want to build a computer, they'll buy a chassis, they'll buy a GPU. I don't see that going away. But if you're not a gamer and you're just a casual user, you're not going to have a desktop anymore.
Sure.
Like it'll just be for gamers only. You'll have like a laptop and you'll have a docking station with a GPU in it. It could play all your games, not like the games, the high-end games with GPU, but it'll be decent and we have all this technology now where your laptop can be your only machine. With Thunderbolt, you can have everything hooked up, but we had to make it complicated. We have different levels of Thunderbolt. We have 1 through 4. And some of them can use the GPU, some of them can't because you don't have enough lanes. But when you go and buy a computer, just like the average person, they say, "Oh, I need Thunderbolt." This computer on the box says it has Thunderbolt, so I think it's what I need. They take it to the cash register, they buy it. They get home, they can't use a GPU because they don't have enough lanes in their Thunderbolt, or it's Thunderbolt 2 and not 4. Or, it just complicates this so much. But once this is uncomplicated, then which it didn't need to be complicated in the first place, we'll have a situation where someone has a laptop that can play the games you could play now on high settings for the most part. That could be their one and only machine, and they just dock it. It's their desktop. They take it with them. It could be a phone. I mean, I know Ubuntu's convergence thing way back was a little bit too soon, but something kind of like that. But I still kind of see it going that direction, but we're kind of delayed because we had to overcomplicate pretty much every technology that's around it. But once we converge on something, I could see the one device thing being a very big component of
Hmm.
this. But the desktop will I think the gamers will keep it alive for their use case. But for people that don't care, I mean, they're already probably fine with an Intel NUC at this point for the average person. So probably wouldn't be too far of a stretch to have a one device for all. But I think at that point, then we have a new platform or something that evolves from this, and then Linux is a greater fit because it's more adaptive. And then next thing it's a sure fit for this kind of thing. And I think that's when it kind of becomes mainstream. But the desktop Linux, no, I don't think Linux even cares if it's dominant there. So it wants the server, and that's what it has.
Hmm. Well,
So
that's as good a place as any to end it, I guess. We're coming up
yep,
on the 2 hour mark, so unless
yep.
there's anything else you want to say, we'll
I
just,
have an endless amount of things to say, but I think time is limited.
as I said, we
So,
I had things written down. I think we hit on about half of them. So there's plenty more for another episode at some point in the future.
awesome. Well, that'd be
So,
great.
uh, where can people find you? Give people all your socials.
LearnLinuxTV. Everything should be there. Basically, it should be that simple.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Yep.
Yeah,
My Twitter should be on there. The YouTube page is on there. The books is on. I have all the things I'm engaged with should be linked right from that place. So
okay,
there you go.
awesome. Um, yeah, I guess I already said that. Nothing else you want to say? Just that's it.
I think that's good. I think we did touch on a lot of things, but I guess if we need to elaborate on something some other time, there's time in the future.
No
So
projects you want to highlight that maybe are coming out at some point?
I wish I could, but it's not like it's secretive. It's like I hate promising things if my
Sure.
interest shifts.
Fair point.
But there's a couple book ideas I'm working on. I might do both, which would be overkill. Knowing me, I probably will, but I don't want to overpromise. So there's like a course I'm working on. There's a couple book ideas I have going on, and about like 30, 40 video ideas that
Mhm.
I have in various stages of completion. So I can tell you there's going to be some. Um, not huge things, but some pretty big projects that are going to come out that they are going to be a lot of fun. So I think people will enjoy. So just go to LearnLinux.tv periodically, and eventually you'll see something new there.
Awesome. I guess I'll do my outro then.
Okay.
Cool. So my main channel is Brody Robertson. I do Linux videos over there 6-ish days a week. Go check it out. I don't know what will be out there when this comes out because I have recorded a bunch ahead, so this will probably be out April sometime. So check out the channel. You'll see some stuff there. My gaming channel is Brody on Games. I stream there twice a week. Currently playing through God of War, but I'm probably done by the time you guys are seeing this, so probably Devil May Cry 4, I don't know, check it out. And also Neo's World Ends With You. If you're listening to the audio version of this, you can find the video version on YouTube at Tech Over Tea. If you're watching the video, you can find the audio on basically any podcast platform. Search Tech Over Tea and you will find it. How do you want to end off the show? What do you want to say?
Go Linux, I guess. I don't know.
I always like
wasn't
putting
that
people on the
clever.
spot. It's
Yeah,
so fun.
yeah, you did.
See you guys later.